Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, uh, based on where you are in the world. My name is Vidar, and this is the Unboxing AI podcast, which I barely made today thanks to some car issues and a very cooperative guest that we have today. So, for those of you who don't know, or for those of you who are joining for the first time, this is the Unboxing AI webinar series by CARPL. We do this every Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern, forever. And this is episode number 19. So I have successfully, somehow magically managed to do this for 19 weeks in a row. It is 8:30 p.m. here in India today, and I am at a colleague's home for drinks. So with that, shameless plug about Couple. Again, in case you don't know, your friendly neighborhood AI platform. We are today, as per a firm called Signify Research, the world's biggest AI marketplace in terms of number of AI applications. We are a single platform that serves as an intermediary layer between the entire world of AI on one side and healthcare providers on the other, enabling them to build, test, deploy, and monitor multiple types of radiology AI solutions and clinical workflows. So enough about us and a little bit about Steve. So today, we're honored, if I may say so, to have Steve Holloway with us today on the show. Steve is the co-founder, managing director of a firm that I think uh, controls the fate of a lot of the startup ecosystem, if I may say, at least the startup ecosystem. Their word is kind of taken as gospel truth by a lot of the world's largest investors that look at our industry very actively, by customers, by buyers, and also, of course, by us who are building in this ecosystem. So we have Steve Holloway, the managing director and co-founder for Signify Research. Steve, again, can't thank you enough for being here today.
Honored to be here. Thanks for Joe.
Awesome. So, as is tradition, we'll start with a minor description of how Steve of what Steve does. As I mentioned, he runs Signify essentially, which is exclusively focused on healthcare technology. I think one of the few firms that do that. He specifically leads the healthcare IT and diagnostics and life sciences research practices at Signify, and includes syndicated, custom, and consultancy projects for clients. I can't even say those words. Uh, including syndicated custom consultancy projects for clients including the world's largest healthcare technology firms, disruptive market entrants like us, big tech conglomerates, and the financial services and investment sector. He's been doing this for 15 years uh, in the health technology market intelligence space, and was earlier a part of In Medica, which was a part of Intern IMS Research, and was also associate director for IHS Incorporated Healthcare Technology Practice. Uh, Unsurprisingly, his core areas of expertise include medical imaging, imaging informatics, and clinical IT. And still, we've never seen you at SIM, Steve. So,
I've been there.
so Steve, why don't we start off with and yes, to everybody there, please feel free to use the Q&A, the chat. You can WhatsApp me, email, however you want to communicate. Ask your questions. Uh, we will prioritize your questions over whatever it is that we'll talk about. So, Steve, yes, what got you into healthcare IT? Like,
Sure.
what's the story look like? Yeah.
Yeah. So degree in medical physiology. So always interested in human anatomy, medicine. At one point toyed with becoming a doctor and decided against it for my sins. But also always quite interested in the business world as well. So I came out of university and found a job as a market analyst, and one of my first markets to cover was global ultrasound. So I spent a lot of time, I guess, in my formative years as an analyst, learning about imaging modality markets and really getting stuck into, obviously, some of the big players, and really and growing my network and understanding the industry in that sort of 25-30 billion dollar environment. So lots of time with the G's and Philips and Siemens of the world. But also at the time, that was really around the advent of point of care ultrasound coming to the market. So sort of 2009, 2010, just after the economic meltdown. But also at that point, I would say we were getting into what I'd call the sort of third generation of PACS and imaging IT as well. So it was a natural progression for me into healthcare IT then on the software side. So first in terms of advanced visualization, but then increasingly around how PACS is evolving into enterprise imaging and all of the sort of wider operational data management pieces there as well. That obviously led into AI. So, having covered that market since about 2010, we certainly saw a real sort of spike of interest around AI technology in sort of 2014, 2015. And that's really where we started doing some deeper analysis in terms of the market. And then Signify was founded 2016, and AI was one of our first topics in terms of full market coverage. So I'd like to think, although I haven't been there from the beginning in the same as many sort of industry veterans I talked to of 40 years, who talk about, plugging in pieces of paper and punch cards into computers. Certainly in terms of the modern era, I guess, of AI and imaging, I've been there since fairly early on. And I think for me, what really is fascinating is I get to blend the medical, physiological, clinical side with the sort of business go-to-market strategy, regulatory, and sort of health economic side as well. And that, to me, certainly keeps me very interested and on my toes in terms of advising clients and supporting in terms of where we think this market is going.
That's super interesting. So two questions, Steve. The first is, and both, around predicting the future, which is, I think, essentially what you are kind of in the business of, studying the present and predicting the future. Doing market research and predicting the future of ultrasound versus predicting the future of AI.
Yeah.
Are they similar, or are they like vastly different in approach?
I think in more mature markets like ultrasound, there is a degree of replacement cycle and sort of stronger recurring metrics that you can use as a basis. I think when you're looking at new market or new technology penetration, it's a little bit harder in terms of really accurate tracking and prediction. You need to be looking more around underlying drivers and giving sort of a wider guidance. And I think the other thing I would say, and it's rich coming from somebody who runs a market intelligence company that is based on giving predictions and sort of 5-year outlooks and all this sort of thing, is we never get it right. I have never got a forecast right in my life accurately. What we try and do is certainly give a degree of certainty in terms of the sort of 1 to 2 year outlook where there's better visibility. And then when you get into kind of 3 to 5 year outlook, it's really around understanding what are the big hurdles or barriers and scenarios that need to occur in a market for that forecast to happen. And it's our job ultimately to do a lot of that balancing to really help customers understand all of the different influences on a market forecast. And then we give them our essentially, mid-level forecast there in terms of expectation, but rarely is that right. There's always upside downside scenarios. So it's our job to try and advise them on the full range there, but at the same time, give our best estimate in terms of why we think something's going to happen, but also the evidence behind it. And I think that's probably where we feel is a real differentiation for Signify as well, is it's not only are we having dedicated industry experts spending time on a given market year round, talking to vendors, talking to lots in the ecosystem who really understand it to build that view. We're constantly refining that view year on year as well, and really providing that advisory support along with the data. So it's not just about data. Yes, historically, data accuracy is super important, and certainly on a short-term outlook, it's very important. But longer term,
Steve, if I was to
yeah,
just double down on that, and ties in well with the question that we've just gotten
yeah,
from Peter Corsardin, I'd say.
yeah.
Uh, have you ever in your career, or I'm sure
Yeah.
you've studied market research as a field as well.
Hmm.
Have you ever seen, or do you in your practice today draw parallels across any other field that we all may be familiar with? Like Peter mentions, from point of care
Yeah.
ultrasound or advanced visualization, maybe
Yeah.
even PACS, VNA.
Yeah.
Do you try to like map your outlay to the growth
Yeah,
of
we
any
look at a
other?
lot of, yeah, we look at, particularly in newer markets, you're always looking for, are there equivalents from the same market characteristics that you can essentially use as a template from a forecast point of view. Um, I think in the case of AI and imaging, you've also got to factor in how many different variables there are, regulatory being a big one.
Hmm.
Some of those regulatory elements in terms of, let's look at, I don't know, generative AI, or with Peter there, autonomous AI, there are degrees of regulatory approval there that it's very hard to second guess, because we can't predict when a regulator is going to approve a new technology. What we can do is look at the evidence behind it and look at other markets in terms of how long it's taken new technology to come to market, or we can look at historical evidence in terms of the same space and say, okay, in cardiology, it's taken 4 years for this technology to come in. How does that apply to MSK? So you're doing a lot of cross-referencing as you go and a lot of triangulation. But that doesn't make it straightforward or easy either, because the other job, and this is something that we actually do as an advisory service sometimes as well, is we call it the chief objection officer, which is where we all sit in the room with companies or company boards, or where they're putting out projections. And our job is to sit there in the corner and say, well, hang on a sec, have you considered X, or have you considered Y? Or,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So that, I think, when we're talking particularly to aggressive investor-backed high growth companies in the AI space, it's also our job to ask those difficult questions and actually probe a bit deeper, maybe than you would expect from customers, to really understand, is what you're saying true, and can you really back it up? And we have a long history of doing that with big health tech vendors as well as the smaller AI vendors. So we
No,
have to be a
and does
critical element.
does it actually get easier, Steve, to predict the future with time? Like predicting an AI outcome or an
Hmm.
AI market size in 2016 versus predicting an AI market size in 2024. Uh, does it actually become easier, or, and specific to AI, has it become easier, or does it still remain like, one of those
Yeah,
question
I,
marks?
I think with AI over time, it has become easier because it's more defined, and you've also got more proof points and more examples of adoption. You've got a degree of different applications and algorithms coming into the market in different settings and different geographies and different systems. So you can start to map those out against each other and then extrapolate. I think when you're doing it, say in 2016, 2017, when we did the first AI in imaging analysis at Signify, there was very little to go on bar, advanced visualization. Before that, some of the original sort of breast CAD, some sort of CADdy tools that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
weren't really great examples either, because they weren't that well adopted, because the usability wasn't great. It created more challenges for users rather than solutions. And I think that is very difficult. And there you're really relying on some of those wider sort of macro factors, and also really digging into the company by company analysis that we do as well. So all of the data you see from us, we're not going top down. We're not saying, okay, cardiology's $1 billion, and therefore we think it's going to be 3 next year. We're doing it vendor by vendor, bottom up per application, in terms of, okay, what did you sell last year? What are you selling next year? What's your expected growth rate? How can you justify that? What about channel analysis? Which markets, FGA, regulatory? By doing that vendor by vendor and rolling it up, you get a much more accurate view of the market. And you do that 3, 4, 5, 6 times over, you start to get a very good database of information, but also really good scrutiny around that core data as well.
That's very interesting. So essentially, uh, it does come down to, like, as you have more and more data available to look at, naturally the
Yeah,
predictions get better. Do you
yeah,
measure the accuracy of your predictions? As somebody
yeah,
who runs a company that has a AI
yeah,
validation platform, I
yeah.
have to ask you that.
Yeah,
Um,
so every year in every edition we do a variance analysis based on prior forecasts and actually mark our own predictions. We
uh,
also at the start of the year, lots of research firms do this, but I think we're slightly different in that we mark our own homework at the end of the year as well. We put out predictions for the year, but then also
yes, you do
put
that.
out,
I
yeah.
see that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I
So,
think that's really
Steve,
important. Yeah.
what has been, sorry, I'm going to just,
Yeah, fine, yeah,
you can
far right.
choose to
Yeah.
not answer. What has been the worst prediction you have ever made in terms of, like,
The worst prediction I've ever made. Oh,
yeah,
um,
like one that has,
what
like,
one
that played out like completely opposite?
Yeah, maybe not one that I made publicly in anything we sort of published, but certainly probably if you go back 8 to 10 years, in some of our sort of investor advice, um, we certainly scrutinized Visage Pro Medicus quite hard in terms of their likelihood of success in a very entrenched PACT market. Um, and I wouldn't say we essentially said they wouldn't succeed, but we said we had significant concerns. They've now got a market cap of 8 billion, I think, and are one of the
It's
leading
crazy. Yeah,
firms in the US. Along with Sector and
yeah,
a few others in terms of
yeah.
winning most of the big enterprise deals there. So certainly we do get it wrong from time to time, but we're more than willing to accept that as well. But yeah, it does happen. I don't have a crystal
No,
ball.
I think betting against message. Yeah, sure. I would count that as as a yeah. So cool. No, moving on. We have a question from one of my
Mm,
colleagues, Amit, Dr. Amit Kumar Garg. He's part of our AI facing
yep,
team, a young physician who we've conned into giving up his career for AI.
yep.
Uh, based on your experience of analyzing the health tech market, have you
Hmm.
observed any common pitfalls that have led to significant downside for startups targeting niche markets or emerging markets? Like something
Sure.
you've seen, you know, like startups do wrong, essentially, I feel, or
Yeah,
market trends that have gone against startups in general.
yeah. I think a few things here. One, trying to go too broad too quick. I would say
Hmm.
staying niche and being sort of category leader in your niche is very important early on. I would also say stay relatively lean. I think we've seen an awful lot of startups go very aggressively in terms of burning through venture capital money and trying to boil the ocean, and actually a lot of them don't survive very long. And I think health tech is littered with that sort of over promise and under deliver. I think some of the most successful and most interesting companies in this segment now are the ones that actually have really done a lot of work in terms of the clinical evidence, really spoken to customers, understood needs, but maybe, are still at the stage where they are in early commercialization, but they're almost at break even or have a route to break even and commercialization and a really good evidence base. The other thing I would say is a lot of startups, particularly again those heavily investment backed aggressive startups, massively underplay how long it takes new technology
Hmm.
implementation in healthcare. Um, I think when you look at this kind of COVID period when we were in negative sort of debt positions and there was an awful lot of capital flying around, I think a lot of investors invested without really understanding the segment, and really understanding that a regulatory pathway only gets you the right to play in a market. It doesn't guarantee commercial success, and the reimbursement even doesn't guarantee commercial success. You've really got to focus on user adoption and education as well. Um, so for me, the companies that have been really successful in terms of market breakthroughs have actually focused a lot, not just on getting the product to market and actually available commercially and having a value attached to it, but they've managed to enhance that value by really understanding the customer, but also
Hmm.
spending a lot of time and effort in terms of training so they're getting the most out of that product and using that as a feedback loop for future product development. The example I'll always use there, if you look at point of care ultrasound, When one of the early examples and case studies of that would be Signify in point of care ultrasound. So when they launched into the market, they basically created the market for point of care ultrasound in anesthesiology, MSK, critical care, and emergency medicine. And they did that really not with anything that was particularly novel in terms of technology, although they packaged the devices nicely, did a good job of marketing and R&D. Ultimately, what it was really around was market creation through training and education. And they invested an awful lot in terms of training and education that made them break through into those segments and create. They were a leader in those segments. And they did that against the Gs and the Philips and the Siemens, who were the big established players in terms of radiology and cardiology and CART-based ultrasound. So that for me is something that's always resonated longer term. And I see this time and again with AI companies who are, pushing their R&D, pushing their technology, pushing their marketing budgets hard, but they're not spending enough time with customers in terms of optimizing and improving and looking at integration and workflows and using that as a refinement loop.
I think,
for
Steve,
product development.
as somebody who's also, kind of studied the ecosystem and is now in this board themselves, like, now CARPL is venture funded and, we are on that kind of growth trajectory. I think it is just, it's easy to say, do not spend a lot of money, but, sometimes I also feel that it's just, there is this constant thought that if only I spend 10% more on this one thing, I can go so much faster. And if I only, and I see us falling into that trap, like of all the people in the world, like we are Indians, we are stingy like hell, but so it's pretty interesting. But if someone was to come to you, Steve, today and ask you, and I know we're going completely off script, but that's okay. If someone was to come to you today and say, hey, I want to start a radiology AI startup today, right? What should I start? What would be your guidance?
Don't. No, I'm joking. What would be my guidance? I think the first thing is understand the problem. And what I mean by that is there are so many products out there at the moment in the AI environment that, might speed up, reduce a click or, automate a measurement, and they'll spend a couple of $1 million and a lot of development time bringing that to the market. But ultimately for radiologists, it doesn't make that much difference. I think really what you've got to focus on when I talk about the problem is the 2 or 3 big factors that are really impacting healthcare today, which is a lack of resources, certainly both in terms of frontline diagnosticians, i.e. radiologists, rad techs, and then also all of the operational side of things and the resources. So, we're looking at things like scan throughput and patient scheduling and all of those sort of operational pieces. I think during that kind of investment boom of sort of 2018 to 2022, everyone went super hard into image analysis and the holy grail of getting to CADX and automatic diagnosis. If you look at what lots of the big imaging modality companies have done over that time, rather than jump into image analysis beyond what they're already doing in AV, they've really focused much more on image acquisition and the operational piece, command centers, what I would call sort of signal to pixel AI around, image quality and those sorts of things. And they've made some gigantic leaps if you look at what they can do now in terms of signal to noise ratios and what they can do in terms of speed of scanners with a new generation of scanners. You're talking a scan protocol that was 25 minutes is now 5 minutes. That's a massive time saving. And that really does make a difference. And I think what they identified early as these problems were coming up is that a radiology department budget is 70% asset management and people management, and 30% actually the diagnostic process in terms of reading. And when you look at that as the slice of the pie, if you make a 10% gain in terms of the asset management and the people management, you are making a big change for that organization compared to 10% and the 30%, if you see what I mean. And it may even be swayed more aggressive than that. So I think that's been very notable over the last couple of years in terms of I guess as we've come out of that boom and
I
a
think,
bit more
Steve,
maturity in the market.
have you also observed like this trend of the large OEMs kind of deconstructing their modalities, or their, like, big iron getting deconstructed into hardware being separate from like software layer 1 and software layer 2? Are you seeing that as well in your conversations and your work?
I think what they're starting to do is realize that on the hardware side, previously they would have had multiple sort of platforms. Ultimately, if you look at MR and CT portfolios, you'd have your value, and then you'd have your next level up and your next level up in terms of technical capabilities. I think what they're realizing now is that software and AI enables you to have a more standardized platform, which from a manufacturing point of view makes life considerably easier, or at least fewer platforms.
And
And then
also
you
from a
can use
regulation
software to kind of scale.
standpoint,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And that makes a big difference as well in terms of cost of supply and R&D. So a lot of it has really been around refinement of platforms. So rather than having 5, 6, 7 different hardware platforms, you scale it back to 2 or 3, and then you use software to fill in the gaps in terms of the sort of price to customer and feature set as well.
Nice.
So I think, again, you look at something like MRI, go back 5, 7, 10 years, everyone was raving that 3 Tesla and 7 Tesla was kind of the new future, and everywhere would have a 3 Tesla. Now, actually, what you're seeing is everyone is going for a workhorse 1.5, unless you're doing really advanced neuro, research, etc. And instead, they're taking a 1.5 Tesla next generation system that's AI enabled, and they can do just as much as they would have been able to do with a 3 Tesla even 3-4 years ago. So I think that commonality of platform is a really interesting thing, and we're also seeing it now that it's changing the setting of care as well. So in CT and MR, you're seeing these point of care solutions come out, extremity, sort of lower Tesla capabilities of putting them into ICUs and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Where
that's going to be
that gets really
incredible, right?
interesting as well.
Or like the MSK scanner in the orthopedic
Exactly. Yeah.
office, or the prostate MR scanner in the uro office. I think those are just. I think we could talk for like hours on clinicians doing radiology, right? I think that deserves a separate session of its own. I think just one last question. Arpan, who's again a dear friend, works in the segmentation and 3D printing space, has asked, based on your market analysis, maybe this is the holy grail question: how overhyped is AI in the world of health tech, and is there
The
need
golden
for
question.
is there some need for some sort of consolidation, or like me, is there need for like hyper fragmentation that everybody builds AI?
This is the golden question. I think if we look back to 2015, 2016, how overhyped was it? Very. We've definitely scaled our forecast back in terms of TAM over the last couple of years, because it's become clearer which markets have opportunity and which don't, and also ultimately it's been market tested what providers are willing to pay as well. I don't think that was as well known previously. I think when it comes into consolidation, my vision for AI on the longer term side is it becomes a bit more like AV is today, where you will have your AI platform, which ultimately delivers 60, 70, 80% of what you use on a day-to-day basis. And then you will have body area or clinical area bundles ultimately that are more specialist and plug into that. I think you'll see that in terms of some of the category leaders now starting to expand or partner up. The news around, I think it was Clearly in Viz this week, was quite an interesting one. Viz obviously pivoting beyond stroke into the cardiac space and using Clearly as its kind of partner there. Really good example of that, where had some success in terms of stroke, but now realizing that if they want to be in cardiac, they need to partner to make that happen. So I think you'll see, probably when we talk about consolidation, it won't all be M&A. I think there'll be a lot of partnerships, and it becomes more of a white label ecosystem then again. But how that is delivered is either going to be through independent platforms like CARPL and others, or it's going to be through probably PACS-based AI orchestration pieces. That's kind of my vision for the next sort of 3 to 5 years on deployment and delivery. What gets really interesting though, then obviously, is we're getting into generative AI and some of the LLMs coming in, and we could spend a whole nother host of time around that. But for me, that sort of that's going to play more in terms of the reporting, clinical decision support, why
No,
best setting.
we've got Annalise annouing their foundational
Yes,
model today.
I
Well,
spoke to
Harrison.
Dimitri this
Yeah,
week about that. So yeah,
likewise.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah,
No, I think Steve, that's an awesome note to end on. A bunch of white label solutions, everybody building AI, delivery to platforms or through packs integrated with
yeah,
platforms, etc.
yeah.
I certainly feel that democratization of the creation of AI is going to be the next, 5, 7, 10 years. We
Mm,
don't know how long, but
yeah.
and
Yeah,
and
well, a lot of
if
it will
MRI
depend on
machines,
how ready the FDA is for that as
no,
well.
and more than that, again, we try to stick to time, but and this is the precise reason why.
Yeah,
But I think, yeah, because somebody's got to report those 5x productivity gains once they come from MR, right? When the
yeah,
25-minute scan becomes 5 minutes, you'll need 5 times more radiologists. So where do they come from? So,
exactly.
so yeah, but Steve, I will end on that. And this is the first time that we've hit time and we have had zero drop off on the attendees. So thank you for that.
Done
But
something right.
this is going to be on YouTube. And next week we'll have another friend from London. We'll have Hugh Garvey talking about. So it'll be, I think,
Cool.
a cool segue
Yeah,
into
he
it
definitely won't keep to
from right
time.
now. Yeah, typically it's 8:30 p.m. in India whenever I do this, so I just enforce the time.
Yeah.
Cool.
Time
Thank
for
you
a
so much,
well-earned
Steve.
drink. Yeah.
Yes, and thank you everyone for joining. Means the world. Thank you so much. Take
Thanks
care,
for this.
Steve. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.